We were hoping you might present your case for those new reading primers you've been requesting. I would be delighted, Faith replied, already mentally preparing her arguments. Wonderful, the mayor shuffled his feet. And my nephew Thomas is visiting from Denver. Fine young man, bank clerk. Perhaps you might like to make his acquaintance at the social after the meeting. Faith's smile remained fixed, though it no longer reached her eyes. I'm afraid I'll need to return to my lesson planning directly after the presentation, Mayor. Please extend my regrets to your nephew. Mayor Harkin's face fell, but he nodded resignedly. This was hardly the first time she had rebuffed his matchmaking attempts. Very well, Miss Jensen, 7 o'clock at the town hall. After he departed, Faith sighed. Another suitor, another gentle rejection. She returned to her arithmetic problems, pushing away the familiar hollow feeling that sometimes crept into her chest on quiet evenings alone in her small teacher's cabin. The following afternoon, as Faith dismissed her students for the day, she caught sight of an unfamiliar figure across the dusty Main Street. A young cowboy leading a sorrel horse stopped before the general store, removing his hat to reveal thick chestnut hair that caught the late afternoon sun. Even from a distance, Faith could see he carried himself differently from the rough-hewn ranchers and miners who populated Silver Creek. There was a quiet dignity in his posture, a gentleness in how he handled his mount. Miss Jensen, little Emma Watson tugged at her skirt. Can I bring my new kitten for showing tomorrow? Faith smiled down at her youngest pupil. As long as she behaves better than last week's toad, Emma. The girl giggled and raced off to join her waiting brother. When Faith looked back toward the general store, the mysterious cowboy had disappeared inside. 2 days later, Faith was gathering wildflowers along the creek that gave the town its name, a botany lesson planned for Monday's class, when the sound of a horse's approach made her straighten. The cowboy she had noticed in town drew his horse to a halt several yards away. "Afternoon, ma'am," he called softly, his voice carrying a hint of the South beneath its western cadence. "Good afternoon," Faith replied, immediately on guard. She had learned that polite caution was necessary on the frontier, especially for a woman alone. The stranger dismounted with fluid grace. Up close she could see he was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 25, with clear green eyes set in a face that seemed more sculpted for poetry than cattle driving. A light stubble shadowed his jaw, and his hands, while calloused, moved with deliberate care as he secured his horse. "Colton Quinn," he introduced himself, maintaining a respectful distance. "New hand at the Rocking M Ranch. Faith Jensen, I teach at the schoolhouse." She lifted her basket slightly, gathering specimens for a natural science lesson. Colton nodded, his eyes taking in the wildflowers with genuine interest. "The Indian paintbrush is particularly fine this year." He gestured to the vibrant red blooms in her collection. Faith couldn't hide her surprise. "You know your wildflowers, Mr. Quinn." A smile touched his lips, transforming his solemn face. "My mother taught botany back in Virginia, before the war. I spent more childhood hours pressing flowers into books than most cowboys would care to admit." Something in Faith's carefully constructed defenses shifted slightly. Here was a cowboy who spoke of botany and carried his mother's knowledge with neither shame nor boasting, simply as fact. "Your mother sounds like a remarkable woman," Faith replied. "She was." A shadow crossed his features. "Yellow fever, 69. "I'm sorry," Faith said, meaning it. Colton changed the subject with gentle efficiency. "I heard the schoolmarm here was building quite a reputation for advancing education on the frontier. Thought I might offer these for your classroom." He reached into his saddlebag and produced a small bundle of books secured with twine. Faith accepted them with cautious curiosity. Untying the string revealed 3 volumes, a well-worn copy of Thoreau's Walden, a botanical guide to Western flora, and a slim volume of Whitman's poetry. "These are," she began, but words failed her. "Not much use to a cowhand," Colton finished for her, "but they might serve your students better." Before Faith could properly thank him, a rider appeared in the distance, calling Colton's name. "Duty calls," he said, mounting his horse with the same fluid movement. "Good day, Miss Jensen." As he rode away, Faith stood clutching the unexpected gift, her orderly world suddenly, inexplicably, tilted on its axis. The town council meeting that evening proved fruitful. Faith secured funding for her new primers. As she walked home in the gathering dusk, she found herself wondering about the enigmatic cowboy and his mother who taught botany in Virginia. Such an unlikely background for a man of the frontier. Over the next 2 weeks, Faith caught glimpses of Colton in town, leading packhorses loaded with supplies, helping the blacksmith with a difficult mare, sitting quietly in the back pew during Sunday services. Unlike the other single men of Silver Creek, he made no obvious attempt to court her attention, which paradoxically drew her notice all the more. Then came the morning Faith arrived at school to find a mason jar filled with perfectly arranged wildflowers on her desk, columbine, larkspur, and delicate white sego lilies. No note accompanied them, but Faith knew with inexplicable certainty who had left them. Her students noticed her distraction that day, especially when she caught herself smiling at the flowers during arithmetic recitations. Miss Jensen's sweet on someone, 12-year-old Billy Harper whispered loudly to his benchmate, causing the older children to giggle and Faith's cheeks to flush scarlet. "That will be quite enough, William," she said firmly. "5 additional sums for you after school." The wildflowers appeared again the following week, and the week after, each arrangement different, each thoughtfully composed to showcase the changing spring blooms. Never a note, never a mention when Faith occasionally encountered Colton in town. Just the quiet gift of beauty, speaking a language that stirred something long dormant within her. On the 4th Monday, Faith arrived early, half expecting another jar of flowers. Instead, she found Colton himself, carefully placing a freshly gathered bouquet on her desk. "Mr. Quinn," she said, startling him. He straightened, removing his hat. "Miss Jensen, I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all." Faith moved to her desk, her heart beating faster than she cared to admit. "I've been wanting to thank you for the flowers." "And the books." Colton nodded, his usual quiet confidence seeming slightly shaken by being caught in the act. "They reminded me of you," he said simply. "The flowers or the books?" Faith asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "Both," he replied without hesitation. "Beautiful, resilient, and containing more wisdom than most folks take time to notice." Faith felt heat rise to her cheeks. Other men had complimented her appearance before, but none had ever likened her to wisdom. Most men in this town seem more interested in finding a wife to cook their meals than sharing ideas, she said carefully. "I can cook my own meals just fine," Colton replied with the ghost of a smile. "But good conversation is harder to come by." Before Faith could respond, the school bell rang, announcing the imminent arrival of her students. "Perhaps," Colton hesitated, then continued with gentle determination, "perhaps you might consider taking Sunday dinner with me. The hotel dining room serves a respectable meal." Against every instinct that had guided her previous rejections, Faith heard herself answering, "I would like that, Mr. Quinn." "Colton," he corrected softly. "Colton," she echoed, the name feeling right on her lips. Sunday dinner at Silver Creek's modest hotel became a weekly ritual. While the town buzzed with speculation about the schoolmarm finally accepting a suitor, Faith discovered in Colton a mind as hungry for knowledge and conversation as her own. He spoke of books he'd read, places he'd seen after the war, and listened with genuine interest to her ideas about education. "Why ranching?" Faith asked one Sunday as they walked along the creek after dinner, the late May sunshine warming the afternoon. "With your background and interests, you could have pursued any number of professions." Colton was silent for a moment, skipping a stone across the water with practiced ease. "After the war, Virginia held too many ghosts. I needed space to breathe, to remember who I was beyond what I'd seen and done." His voice grew quieter. "There's an honesty to this work, to cattle and horses, to weather and seasons. No pretense." Faith understood then that beneath his quiet exterior lay wounds from a conflict that had torn the nation apart when they were both still children. She had lost an older brother at Antietam, though she rarely spoke of it. "And you," Colton asked, "what brought a Boston-educated woman to Wyoming Territory?" Faith gazed at the distant mountains. Freedom, I suppose. In Boston, my options were limited to marriage or becoming a maiden aunt who teaches piano to other people's children. She smiled wryly. Here I may be judged for being unmarried, but at least I have my own classroom, my own ideas. And a town full of persistent suitors, Colton added with a hint of humor. Faith laughed. Yes, though most seem more interested in acquiring a wife than knowing a woman. Colton stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression earnest. I want to know you, Faith Jensen. Not just the schoolmarm, you. The sincerity in his voice stripped away her practiced defenses. For the first time since arriving in Silver Creek, Faith allowed herself to consider that perhaps love and intellectual fulfillment weren't mutually exclusive after all. As spring gave way to summer, their courtship progressed with a gentle steadiness that suited them both. Colton brought her books along with Wildflowers, and Faith found herself sharing her dreams of expanding educational opportunities in the territory. They debated ideas, shared silence, and slowly the walls Faith had built began to crumble. During a town social in early July, they danced together for the first time, causing a ripple of whispers among the townspeople. Never thought I'd see the day, Mayor Harkins commented loudly to the general storekeeper. What's that quiet cowboy got that my nephew hasn't? Faith pretended not to hear, but later, as she and Colton walked beneath a sky brilliant with stars, she asked, Does it bother you? The talk. Colton considered her question with his characteristic thoughtfulness. People will always talk, doesn't change what matters. And what matters to you, Colton Quinn? Faith asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He stopped walking and gently took her hands in his. Truth, honor, beauty, his eyes met hers, you. The first time he kissed her was beside the schoolhouse, in the golden light of a late July afternoon. It was a gentle kiss, respectful yet filled with unmistakable emotion that left Faith breathless and certain that her life had irrevocably changed. As summer progressed, Faith found herself thinking less about independence and more about partnership. Colton never suggested she abandon her teaching. Instead, he brought articles about educational developments in the East and discussed them with genuine interest. Their happiness seemed complete until a dusty August day when a stranger rode into Silver Creek. Faith was writing the day's history lesson on the blackboard when she heard the commotion outside, raised voices, then a gunshot fired into the air. Ordering her students to remain in their seats, Faith moved cautiously to the window. In the street stood a hard-faced man with a marshal's badge, confronting Colton outside the general store. Colton Quinn, the man shouted. Or should I say Lieutenant Colton Blackwell of the Confederate Army. Faith's blood ran cold. Blackwell. The students crowded behind her despite her instructions as the confrontation unfolded. That name doesn't exist anymore, Marshal, Colton replied evenly. The war's been over 10 years. Tell that to the families of the men who died at Chambersburg, the marshal spat. Arson and murder don't have a statute of limitations, Blackwell. Faith watched in horror as the marshal produced papers. I'm taking you to Pennsylvania to stand trial for war crimes. The accusations hung in the air like summer lightning. Colton's unit had allegedly burned civilian homes during a Confederate raid into Pennsylvania, resulting in deaths. Crimes that, if true, went beyond the accepted conduct of warfare. That evening, Faith found herself outside the town jail, demanding to see Colton. Sheriff Donovan, looking uncomfortable, finally allowed her 5 minutes. Colton sat on the cell's simple cot, his face etched with resignation when he saw her. Faith, he said softly, you shouldn't be here. Is it true, she asked, her voice trembling. Your name, the accusations. Colton's shoulders slumped. Quinn was my mother's maiden name. I took it after the war. He met her eyes with painful honesty. I was at Chambersburg. My cavalry unit was ordered to burn the town in retaliation for Union destructions in Virginia. Faith felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. And the deaths? We were told to burn property, not harm civilians. His voice grew hollow. But buildings burned quickly and not everyone escaped. I tried to help a family, a mother and children trapped by flames. Got them out, but their father, He closed his eyes. I've carried that man's face with me every day since. Why didn't you tell me? Faith whispered. How could I? Colton's voice broke. I came west to start anew, to be a man who saves rather than destroys. Then I met you, so principled, so certain of right and wrong. His hands gripped the cell bars. I couldn't bear to see the look that's in your eyes right now. Faith stepped back, her mind reeling. The man she had come to love, a Confederate officer, implicated in civilian deaths. Her brother's killers had worn the same gray uniform. I need time, she managed to say before turning and fleeing the jailhouse. For 3 days, Faith went through the motions of teaching while her inner world collapsed. Colton was to be transported east the following week. The town buzzed with the scandal, many defending the quiet cowhand they'd come to respect, others condemning the deception. On the 4th night, unable to sleep, Faith lit a lamp and opened the botanical guide Colton had given her. A pressed columbine fell from between its pages, along with a folded note she had never noticed. With trembling fingers she opened it. To rebuild what war destroys, this is our generation's burden and privilege. Whether through education or honest labor, may we create more than we've lost. CQ. Faith read the words over and over, recognizing in them the essence of the man she had come to know, not a criminal hiding from justice, but a soul seeking redemption through quiet acts of creation. Dawn found her at the jailhouse again, this time with determination replacing confusion. Sheriff Donovan met her at the door. Miss Jensen, the prisoner's being transferred today. Marshal's orders came through early. I need to see him, Faith insisted. Please. The sheriff hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. 5 minutes, that's all I can give you. Colton looked up as she approached his cell, dark circles beneath his eyes suggesting sleepless nights that matched her own. I found your note, Faith said without preamble, in the botanical guide. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. I wrote that the day I gave you the books, wasn't sure I'd have the courage to let you read it. Faith pressed her hand against the bars. You're not the man you were during the war, I know that now. The law may see differently, he replied quietly. Then I'll go to Pennsylvania, she said, her voice gaining strength. I'll speak for the man you've become. Character witnesses can make a difference in court. Colton shook his head. I can't ask that of you. Your place is here with your students. My place, Faith said firmly, is wherever truth and justice need defending. You taught me that love doesn't diminish independence, it strengthens purpose. Before he could respond, the marshal appeared with Sheriff Donovan. Time to go, Blackwell. As they led Colton away, he looked back once. Whatever happens, he called, the flowers will bloom again next spring. Remember that. The schoolhouse felt empty without Colton's weekly wildflowers. Faith threw herself into teaching by day and writing letters by night, to Pennsylvania officials, to Army officers who had served with Colton, to witnesses from Chambersburg. Autumn painted the Wyoming landscape in gold and crimson, and still no word came. Faith's students noticed her distraction, the way she would stop mid-sentence sometimes, gazing out the window toward the eastern horizon. Are you waiting for Mr. Quinn to come back, Miss Jensen? Little Emma Watson asked one afternoon as class ended. Faith smiled sadly. Yes, Emma, I believe I am. My pa says he's a good man, no matter what name he had before, the child offered. Pa says a man who knows wildflowers can't be all bad. October brought the first snow and finally, a letter bearing a Pennsylvania postmark. Faith's hands shook so badly she could barely break the seal. The trial had concluded. Witness testimonies, including from survivors of the Chambersburg fire who remembered a young Confederate officer risking his own safety to rescue trapped civilians, had resulted in a reduced sentence. Colton had been given a pardon on condition of community service and restitution payments to the affected families. He was coming home. Faith read the letter until the words blurred before her eyes. Then she did something she had never done before. She dismissed school early and spent the afternoon gathering the last autumn wildflowers that had survived the early frost. 2 weeks later, the stagecoach arrived carrying a thinner, more weathered Colton Quinn. Faith waited at the station, clutching her gathered bouquet, heart pounding against her ribs. When he descended from the coach, his eyes found hers immediately. For a moment, neither moved. Then Faith crossed the distance between them, holding out her modest arrangement of late asters and golden prairie grasses. "I brought you wildflowers," she said, her voice catching. Colton took the bouquet in one hand and Faith's fingers with the other. "You waited," he said, wonder in his voice. "Of course I waited," Faith replied. "Some lessons take longer to learn than others. But I finally understood that true freedom isn't found in independence alone. It's found in choosing who to love, who to forgive, who to become." Later that evening, as they walked along the now frozen creek where their courtship had begun, Colton stopped beneath a stand of bare cottonwoods. "I have nothing to offer you but a complicated past and an uncertain future," he said honestly. "The restitution payments will take years to complete." Faith shook her head. "You offer truth, Colton. After deception, you chose honesty at great personal cost. What more could I ask for in a partner?" "A partner," he repeated, a smile warming his tired face. "Is that what you want us to be?" "Partners in all things," Faith confirmed. "Your past is part of who you are, just as my stubbornness is part of me. We can build something new together, something that honors both education and wildflowers." Beneath a sky brilliant with stars, Colton dropped to one knee in the snow. "Faith Jensen, will you marry me? Not to diminish your independence, but to strengthen our shared purpose." "Yes," she answered without hesitation. 1,000 times yes. They were married on Christmas Day, 1875, in Silver Creek's small church. Faith wore a crown of winter greenery in her hair instead of traditional flowers, and Colton took her name alongside his chosen one, becoming Colton Quinn Jensen in a symbolic joining of his past and future. Spring found them in a small house near the schoolhouse, where Faith continued teaching while Colton worked at the Rocking M Ranch. In the evenings, they read together, debated ideas, and planned a future that would eventually include a small school of their own, one where frontier children would learn both practical skills and appreciation for wildflowers. When the Indian paintbrush bloomed crimson against the green hills that May, Colton brought Faith the first bouquet of the season, just as he would every spring for the next 40 years. And Faith, the schoolmarm who had rejected every suitor until a quiet cowboy brought her wildflowers, understood at last that true education meant continuous learning, especially about love.